Well, I think we've done it. We're only 2 in, but I have found the worst Best Picture winner of all time. Not you. The second Academy Awards were held on April 3rd, 1930 at the Coconut Grove in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. It was the first time the winners weren't revealed until the night of the ceremony, which led to a bit of drama with Mary Pickford winning Best Actress for Coquette, another particularly bad film. At the time, there were no official nominees, or at least the nominees weren't made aware that they were being considered for any awards. Both who was considered and who won was decided by a board of judges made up of people from the Academy. And since Mary Pickford was one of the founding members of the Academy, she knew she was in consideration and lobbied the judges for her win, having them over for tea, a for your consideration chamomile. It is largely considered one of the worst performances ever to win an Academy Award, and I would have to agree with that sentiment. And after the controversy surrounding her win, the awards changed to a one-member, one-vote policy. This also marks the first talking picture and first musical to win Best Picture with the Broadway Melody. If you want to skip to me talking about the actual movie, there are time codes in the description, but first, a little bit on sound. Hollywood had just completed its transition to sound, which many people consider started with the success of The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson in 1927. In 2 years, the industry had completely transitioned to sound, from production to exhibition, spending an estimated $300 million in the process. And they did it just in time, because if you know anything about American history, you know that April of 1930 was only 6 months after Black Tuesday, the day the stock market crashed, and what is today considered the beginning of the Great Depression. By 1929, talking pictures were crushing silent films at the box office, and the transition likely helped the industry weather the first wave of the Great Depression, which was just a little cute little nickname everyone had for it back then, right?
No, that is not true.
No?
No.
You didn't know?
No.
Okay. There were 2 major problems when combining sound and film, and 2 major solutions duking it out to become the industry standard. The problems were amplification and synchronization. The problem of amplification was solved when Lee DeForest invented the Audion tube in 1906, a vacuum tube that could take a weak electrical signal and amplify it into a larger one. As it turns out, it was hiding in his mustache. The synchronization of image and audio was a little more competitive. There were basically 2 different solutions that people pursued to the synchronization problem. The first being the sound on disc method. This is exactly what it sounds like. Sound was recorded onto discs and then played back in conjunction with the film, usually with some kind of mechanical device connected to the projector's motor that would turn the disc at the appropriate rate to the film. Thomas Edison, the notorious elephant snuff film producer, and William Kennedy Laurie Dixon would try this method with their kinetophone, a sound variation on their kinetoscope, where an individual would look through a peephole at the top of the device. But clearly film wasn't going in the direction of individual exhibition, and so the most popular, or at least the most successful incarnation of sound on disc was Vitaphone, introduced by Warner Brothers in 1926. You have to say Vitaphone like that. The first film to utilize the Vitaphone system was 1926 Don Juan, starring John Barrymore. But Don Juan was a silent film that only used Vitaphone to synchronize its score. It wasn't until the aforementioned The Jazz Singer that dialogue appeared on screen in some brief improvised moments by Al Jolson.
You ain't heard nothing yet.
But the first true all-talking film was 1928's Lights of New York. All 3 of those films used, say it with me, Vitaphone. I wonder if anyone actually said it with me. Sound on disc wasn't an ideal system though. For one thing, it was all but impossible to edit the sound once it had been recorded onto the disc, and it was easy to lose synchronization when showing the film. Luckily, around the same time, in 1919, 3 German inventors would invent the tri-ergon process. The tri-ergon. It doesn't have the same effect. This is a process in which sound would be recorded directly onto the film strip itself using the variable density method. Basically, sound waves would be converted into light, which would be photographed onto the film in a variety of densities. Get it? Variable density. When projected, it would be converted back into sound. There would also be RCA photophone, which used a variable area system that looks more like a traditional sound wave. Now, from way back in the beginning of sound on film, people were making musicals, from Thomas Edison to Lee DeForest and his mustache. And in 1929, MGM, the studio that would go on to produce some of the greatest movie musicals of all time, released the Broadway Melody, billed as the new wonder of the screen, and all talking, all dancing, all singing dramatic sensation. It had songs written by Arthur Freed and Nacio Herb Brown, whose songs, including You Were Meant for Me and Broadway Melody from the Broadway Melody, would be used years later in Singin' in the Rain. The Broadway Melody is one of only 3 films to ever win Best Picture and nothing else, Grand Hotel and Mutiny on the Bounty being the other 2. And it is bad. Feels silly to say, but spoilers ahead. The Broadway Melody tells the story of Eddie Kearns and the Mahoney sisters, Hank and Queenie. Eddie is a Broadway songwriter and performer, and he's asked Hank and Queenie to leave the road and bring their act to a new show he's doing on Broadway. Hank and Eddie have a little thing going on. I guess they're not technically fiancés, but they're both talking about marriage from the moment we see them together.
Well, Hank, now that you're here, when are we going to get married?
That is until Eddie sees Queenie, and he's such a creep that he immediately starts kissing her on the mouth. So this creep Eddie is so aggressive about getting with his fiance's sister that the sister runs off to this other rich creep, Jock Warner, who gives her a lot of expensive stuff and then tries to force himself on her.
I've done all these things for you. Aren't you going to be nice to me?
Once Hank realizes that Eddie and Queenie are in love, she has a Harry and the Hendersons moment.
Leave us alone!
I wouldn't marry you if you was the last man on earth.
Goodbye, my friend.
Your wife.
And Eddie and Queenie end up together. And Hank goes off, back on tour, with a new blonde woman. I think it's supposed to be a happy ending, and maybe it was in 1929, but to my contemporary point of view, it feels very dark and very depressing. Queenie has given up on performing and ended up with this abusive man, and yes, he is abusive. He gets so angry and controlling when Queenie starts seeing Jock. And then Hank is going back on the road, the thing she was trying to get away from at the start of the film.
Hank will be much happier back on the road. Why, she couldn't give it up. It's her life.
Oh yes, she could.
Opening in Peoria. 4 shows a day.
Opening in Peoria. 4 shows a day. Okay, aside from all that, because I'm willing to look past some of the flawed storytelling of the past if there are other aspects of the film that are still worthwhile. The cinematography, the songs, the performances. There aren't. And a lot of this might have to do with the transition to sound, because the cinematography in the Broadway Melody is so goddamn boring, especially having come out of watching Wings and Sunrise, which felt so contemporary and dynamic in their camera work. Maybe the technical limitations of trying to record sound along with the images at the time didn't allow for any kind of fancy or any camera movement, but that is no excuse for the pacing. And maybe I need to stay off TikTok, but it felt like you could have fit an entire movie in the spaces in between the dialogue. There are some moments that try for patter, for screwball even, with some rapid backstage dialogue, and I appreciate the effort, even if they can't quite nail it, but every other moment in this film feels like it's slowly plodding along. There's one especially egregious scene early on where the sister's uncle comes to their hotel room, and from the moment he knocks until the moment they open the door, there is a full 26 seconds of essentially silence, as if they're on stage and feel the need to wait for Hank to walk from the bathroom to the door. That is what the entire film feels like, and it is painful. I find that people generally have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to older films, and it's because of movies like this. When people think of watching old movies, the experience of watching this film is what they're thinking of. And it's a shame because they miss out on some really great ones. In an attempt to find some sort of silver lining, I will say I do enjoy the songs in the film. We hear the Broadway Melody 485 times, but it's catchy, so I don't mind so much. You Were Meant for Me is a nice ballad. The rest of the songs exist. Yes, they are pretty forgettable, but forgettable in the way a meal at McDonald's is forgettable. It's not going to fill you, but you have a fine time while you're eating it. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you just sit there and cry while you're shoving fries into your face. I don't know you. But speaking of songs, the film did contribute one very important thing to the movie musical, and that was filming to a pre-recorded soundtrack. Irving Thalberg, the producer on the film, wanted reshoots done to the Wedding of the Painted Doll number. Sound technician Douglas Shearer, knowing it would be very expensive, suggested that they take the existing recording and have the actors pantomime. This is a technique that is still used today for film musicals, although there have been quite a few films that have utilized live vocals over the years, including Peter Bogdanovich's At Long Last Love and more recently 2012's Les Miserables, blah, 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 blah. I have committed to watching each of these Best Picture winners at least twice. And after Broadway Melody, I had a good long think about the decisions that I make in my life. It was truly a painful experience sitting through this film. But I am excited for what is next, 1930s All Quiet on the Western Front. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Hey everyone, and welcome to my end screen. Here you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure to turn on alerts, ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. You can check out some of my films here, or click on this other thing that I have linked out to. Bye!